Yep.
Pick up now.
Yep.
He's reading.
Tucker.
All right, where's my glasses?
He's going to be a challenge. He's going to be one of those hard to watch kids.
It's a very sensitive microphone.
Okay.
All right. Job chapter 8. Let me pull back up my... All right. There's one word I wanted to check here. Rahab.
We're in 8, right?
We're in chapter 8, yes. All right. So last time we finished with Job responding to the first of his friends, Eliphaz. Eliphaz is the oldest of the three. And Job's response basically says it is just for him to complain. To ask, why is it that God is bringing such calamity upon me when God himself has already declared his righteousness to me? There's no hope left in Job's own life. He, in fact, now is hating his life. And you can see, let me grab a Kleenex box.
What does that have to do with Job?
Shh. It's an illustration. All right. It's always useful to consider how we should apply Job's conclusions even to ourselves. Job is now sees that there's absolutely no hope in his life. All of it is vanity. Everything that everyone praises as sign of goodness, as success, ultimately is useless to him. He will lie down in the earth and he will have absolutely nothing left for everything that he had in this life. And that's true. And it's true for all of us, even though we will likely never suffer remotely close to what Job suffered. Yet we also have to count our lives just as much as in vain. Because in the end, remember the argument, the adversary who is accusing Job before the throne of God, and God's response. God says Job is righteous. The adversary says he will curse you if you take away what he has. Meaning, he will not find his hope in you. All this time, his hope has been in his circumstance, in his blessings in this life. And it is always a temptation for Christians to think the same thing. And we naturally do the same when calamity comes upon us, to wonder what it is that we have done that God is punishing us. And the fact is, God does chasten us and does use tribulation and suffering so that we will count the things of this world as ultimately of no value and useless before God. So that we will find our only hope in him. The fact that God is so rich in blessings toward us most of the time is a demonstration of his goodness and his mercy. And we should remember that we should see the blessings that he has given to us as something that comes to us only for the sake of his Son, Jesus Christ, and not because of any goodness that is in us. And we can rejoice that God has so blessed us. But remember that everything that he blesses us with, aside from his word and his sacraments, is ultimately going to turn to nothing. There's no real hope in those things. They're to be used for the time, but not to be trusted in. All right. Job ends his response with, "For now I shall lie in the earth. You will seek me, but I shall not be." Then Bildad the Shunammite, answered and said, "How long will you say these things?" So remember, Bildad we think is probably the middle-aged person of the three. "How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind? Does God pervert justice, or does the Almighty pervert the right?" In other words, can't you view any evil that happens to you in this life as a just condemnation from God, or shouldn't you do so?
What chapter are we in?
Chapter 8. "If your children have sinned against him," against God that is, "well, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression." Ouch. Remember, Job's children all died in a single day. And now this man's saying, perhaps they sinned against him, and so their judgment is just. But what about you, Job? "If you will seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy, if you are pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be very great." Again, I want you to consider the words of the friends for their own sake. Ignore Job's particular circumstance and continue to ask the question, is what these men say true? Are they speaking the truth?
So far,
And-
yeah.
In general, yes. "For inquire, please, of bygone ages." In other words, don't just listen to my advice. Think back to what we know of the fathers. And consider what the fathers have searched out. "For we are but of yesterday and know nothing. Our days on earth are a shadow. Will they not teach you and tell you and utter words out of their understanding? Can papyrus grow where there is no marsh? Can reeds flourish where there is no water? While yet in flower and not cut down, they wither before any other plant. Such are the paths of all who forget God. The hope of the godless shall perish." All true. "His confidence is severed. His trust is a spider's web," or literally a spider's house. "He leans against his house, but it does not stand. It just evaporates. He lays hold of it, but it does not endure. He is a lush plant before the sun, and his shoots spread over his garden. His roots entwine the stone heap." See the problem? There's nothing really solid for this plant to grasp on. It grows up, it's beautiful for a while, but its roots are buried in stone. "He looks upon a house of stones. If he is destroyed from his place, this beautiful plant, then it will deny him, saying, 'I have never seen you,' the house from which it's growing up. It says, don't even barely know you're there, buddy. Because before you know it, that plant's gone and nobody remembers it anymore. Behold, this is the joy of his way, and out of the soil others will spring." In other words, you'll be replaced by somebody else, and everyone will forget you. "Behold, God will not reject a blameless man, nor take the hand of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouting. Those who hate you will be clothed with shame, and the tent of the wicked will be no more." So, judge the words for their own sake. Don't think about Job's situation. All these words are true, once again. In fact, Job will, in his responses, say many similar things himself. The problem, of course, is at the beginning, where in the first few verses, Bildad accuses Job of speaking empty wind, words are meaningless, Job. You have no right to complain to God. His mistake is that all suffering is of sin. Comes to you because of personal sin. That there can be no suffering or tragedy or trial in this world that God does not intend for a greater purpose. A purpose that we might not even know. Now this will be a recurring theme as you go forward. Job's question is always why. He wants an explanation. He knows it's not in himself. And as we see his response now to Bildad, he does not trust in his own righteousness. It's very clear. But he wants to know why. He knows his righteousness is from God, but he wants to know why. Why do these things happen to me? Explain it. But he never gets an answer. Not even till the very end when his situation is restored and he's brought to health again. Job never gets an answer. In the end, he has to trust that what God did was, in the end, righteous and for purpose that Job himself never in this life will see or understand. We must always remember that, because we often will get ourselves into the same mindset as Job and think that God owes us an explanation, and he never promises to give us one. And it is only, of course, in death and in the new life that we will finally see and know. As long as we are here, we have to continually live by faith that trusts in the righteousness that God declares despite our circumstance. Okay, now Job replies. This is 2 chapters. Then Job answered and said, "Truly, I know that it is so." You're right, Bildad. I don't deny a word that you just said. But here's something that you're missing. How can a man be in the right before God? You're assuming it's possible. All you say about the wicked is correct. But you're assuming that any man could be right before God in the first place. If one wished to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. So, arguing with God, God brings forward 1,000 accusations. 1,000 things you didn't even realize yourself, weren't even aware of. And then when he says them, you have no response. God is just and right. You can't answer him. You can't contradict him. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has hardened himself against him and succeeded? He who removes mountains. You're talking about little plants that rise up and wither away. Our God can wipe away entire mountains. And they know it not. When he overturns them in his anger. Who shakes the earth out of its place and its pillars tremble. Who commands the sun and it does not rise. Who seals up the stars. Who alone stretched out the heavens and trampled the waves of the sea. So this is creation language. You'll see it many times in Job. And the creation language in Job follows the general creation model that you'll see in the ancient Near Eastern world, except that they adapt the understanding that they have of the creation. But God himself says, it is me, not these many false gods and all their petty wars and all this kind of things that have done all this. I made it. I stretched out the heavens. It is mine. God himself stretched out the heavens. So they had the picture of the heavens as being a great hammered sheet, stretched and expanded out. Who made the bear and Orion, the Pleiades? Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. Ursa Major. Yes.
Wow.
Orion, the Pleiades, and the chambers of the south. The chambers of the south are the great seas underneath the world. Again, you have to understand this in terms of how they understood creation. The world was founded on the depths, the great depths of the sea. Who does great things beyond searching out and marvelous things beyond number? Behold, he passes by me, and I see him not. He moves on, but I do not perceive him. Behold, he snatches away. Who can turn him back? Who will say to him, what are you doing? God will not turn back his anger. In other words, so now the point is, what is any man against God's anger and wrath? Beneath him bowed the helpers of Rahab. Now there's two Hebrew words that are spelled the same way as this name. There's Rahab, which is Rahab, the prostitute in Jericho. There's that name. This is a different word. It's a different letter. Rahab was one of the ancient sea serpents. And you see this referred to other times. Later we'll hear about Leviathan. Again, the idea there is chaos. Right. So that the ancient societies said, well, chaos was represented as a great sea monster. And it ruled, it reigned. And the Lord says, no, it doesn't. I stomp that thing down. I tame it. And it's like nothing when I do. So Rahab, the great, terrible, seven-headed sea monster, he says nothing to the Lord. They all bow down before God himself. And so people are afraid of the creation. They trust in all these false gods and says, I am the Lord. And all these great and terrible forces that you fear, they're nothing to me.
I wonder, well, the Leviathan would just be a representation of chaos. This makes me, wonder if there's, anybody out there who believes that, believes in the Big Bang Theory as well as God, as the Big Bang Theory was chaos.
Yeah.
The world was created, or all these things were created, and there was chaos among them because there was no organization. And then God formed them and organized them and took away the chaos.
Yeah. Lots of Christians believe that.
And that makes
Lots of Christians believe that. We basically believe that. We may differ on the time frame, but the end result is exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Well, Genesis 1 describes it as chaos.
Mm-hmm.
The earth was formless, void, empty. And then God brought order to it. Okay. But anyway, I want to get too deep into the questions of ancient Near Eastern creation mythology and how God contradicts all of the pagan nations and shows who he is. But the pictures and the symbolism are there. And we can gain insight into them if we look at it. But that's not the point here. The point for the present is that the Lord himself governs over all of the creation, all of the forces of the world, all of the forces of men, even the terrible forces of nature itself. All right. How then can I answer him, choosing my words with him? Though I am in the right, I cannot answer him. I must appeal for mercy to my accuser or my judge. Again, Job, I know nothing in myself of which I am guilty. No unconfessed sin whatsoever. And even though I am in the right, still I have no right to answer him. I must do nothing but beg for mercy before the judge. This is how Christians approach God. We know our righteousness in Christ, and we may not even be aware of any specific sin, although none of us can say that, I'll guarantee it. And yet, we can only plead for mercy. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse me from secret faults, the psalm say. If I summoned him and he answered me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. For he crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. In other words, even if God would obey me and come and listen to me, to hear my complaint, if he appeared before me, I would not believe that he was listening to my voice. Why? Because God is not commanded by man. If God appears, it is because he himself ordained it to be so. He crushes me with a tempest and multiplies my wounds without cause. He will not let me get my breath, but fills me with bitterness. If it is a contest of strength, behold, he is mighty. If it is a matter of justice, who can summon him? Just like you summon somebody to appear, grant me a hearing. This word is what summoning. If it's a matter of justice, how can I demand that God grant me a hearing? Though I am in the right, my mouth would condemn me. Though I am blameless, he would still prove me perverse. And then he says, I am blameless, but I regard not myself. I loathe my life. It is all one. Therefore, I say, in answer to Bildad, he destroys both the blameless and the wicked. Judged on themselves for their person, the wicked and the righteous are equally guilty. That's Job's answer to Bildad's assertion that Job is guilty of some sin, that's why he suffers.
Just as God makes rain to fall on the just and the unjust, he makes calamity to fall on the just and the unjust.
Right. And for the unjust, it is a judgment, but for the just, it is a chastening. Whom the Lord loves, he chastens. All right. When disaster brings sudden death, he mocks at the calamity of the innocent. We're not sure what this word calamity means, by the way. This is our guess for the Hebrew word. What is the word there? Yeah. Actually, there is no real definition that we're given. We think it's calamity. Masah. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covers the faces of its judges. If it is not he, who then is it? My days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. They see no good. They go by like skiffs of reed. Skiffs are ships made of reed boats. Like an eagle stooping or swooping on the prey. If I say, I will forget my complaint, I will put off my sad face, and I will be of good cheer. I become afraid of all my suffering, for I know you will not hold me innocent. In other words, put on a cheery face in the midst of all of this suffering. I can't. Because I know that all of the positive thinking in the world is not going to do a thing to answer God. I shall be condemned. Why then do I labor in vain? If I wash myself with snow and cleanse my hands with lye being like the caustic stuff that eats into the skin even. Yet you will plunge me into a pit, and my own clothes will abhor me. For he, that is God, is not a man as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come to trial together. There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand on us both. In other words, the idea of an arbiter, the judge. Can there be a judge that stands between God and man? The judge would have to be higher than God to do that. See? That's what Job is saying here. Now, Job is not distinguishing. No, we see Job understands that there is such an arbiter in truth. But now he's dividing between God, who is one, and man. No, there's no one above God. that can pass judgment between God and man. God is the highest, the Ancient of Days. Let him take his rod away from me, and let not dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak without fear of him, for I am not so in myself. All right. So, well, Job's response continues for another chapter, but we're going to stop there and break off a little early. And then we'll get into Zophar, because Zophar's the youngest of the three, the most flamboyant of the three, the arrogance of youth. He kind of ratchets up the accusation against Job. And it's a shorter section. All right.
I think it's more that God is the arbiter between sin and man.
Well, what we'll see, of course, is God provides the arbiter, the judge, that can stand between God and man. And the way he does so is by joining God and man in one person, in Christ. And Christ then becomes our arbiter, our mediator. But yet, a mediator, not an arbiter, not a judge above God himself. Mediator. So, in terms of arbiter, there is no arbiter that's over God and man that can judge. But there is a mediator. Alright, so I'm going to change and run the fleet supply and get this outlet fixed right away. Because any of the other outlets you guys can reset, but if that thing goes down, that's bad.
Yeah. We're gonna leave and be back by lunch too.
The electrician seems to thinking that we could have an issue with our underground conduit out to the power pole.
Do you ever feel the energy over there?
No, but I haven't specifically checked for it. I don't know that I can feel
This is
the
so
electrical
weird.
energy so much. I can feel more of the subtle ones, or body energies I can feel, but I've never detected electrical power. Did you finish
No, I
this
didn't.
off?
I left it run.
Did you?